On day one of the bowl season, we are going to have a football game played at a baseball stadium, a historic baseball park, Fenway Park. We're going to have a head coach, Scott Satterfield, who is going to be coaching one team, his new team, his Cincinnati Bearcats, that he's only been coaching for a week. He's been the head coach of Cincinnati for a week. And he's going to be coaching against the team that he's been coaching for 4 years. So for the past 4 seasons, he's been coaching those guys up until just about a week ago. And he's going to be coaching against them like that. And to make it even sweeter than that, more intriguing and interesting than that, Scott Satterfield's going to have to stand on the same side of the field right next to those guys that he was the head coach of just about 10 days ago. Bowl season. Don't you love it? We got 2 of these gems coming up on Friday, December 16th. So we've got the Hometown Lenders Bahamas Bowl, one of our all-time favorites there, with UAB taking on Miami. And then the aforementioned Wasabi. No, that's coming up on Saturday. I'm sorry. Did I screw up my bowl schedule right there? I did. We got 2 ranked teams going at it on Friday at 3 Eastern time. That is the Duluth Trading Cure Bowl between Texas San Antonio and Troy. 2 ranked teams. They shouldn't be ranked, but they're ranked because they've got good records and they play in the group of 5. They shouldn't be ranked. Neither one of these teams has earned a top 25 ranking, but they are ranked. So it's our first ranked matchup. Typically, it doesn't come this early in the bowl season. And again, the Duluth Trading Cure Bowl, which has produced some exciting bowl games. Coastal Carolina and Northern Illinois last year, 47-41, right down to the wire, last play of the game. Controversial finish right at the goal line. All right, welcome to Voice of College Football. Please, before you do anything else, just hit the like button. Get that out of the way. Hit that like button. You're done with it. And let people know that we are talking college football here every day with you, every day, every night. If not here on the main channel, one of our illustrious team channels right here at the Voice of College Football. So lock it in and bring some people with you, because we want to be doing this next football season and the next one after that and the next one after that and the next one after that. So read between the lines. Mark doesn't want to have to work for a living. So bring it on in here to the Voice of College Football. All right, let's get to the phone lines. And before we do that, and we've left the link in the chat, so please join us. We remind you that the Amazon link is in the description section of all the videos. So if you go to any video, which most of you have not been looking at the videos recently, but that is the YouTube life of a YouTuber here. We go through our stretches and our ups and downs and our ebbs and flows. So we're ready to take off again here. So help me. Let's take off again on these videos. We've got one coming out soon because I posted most surprising teams of 2022. Check out that video. So some of you misinterpreted that. No issue there. I get it. You were thinking surprising regardless of being a good surprise or a bad surprise. No, we're going to do surprising, meaning positive. Surprised everyone in their accomplishments, the most surprising teams of 2022. And now we will do the most disappointing teams. Okay, we'll release that as well coming up. And I believe that, I think I'm going to have to release a video because I've got something to say about opt-outs. I think it's we've hit that time. And I'm not just going to blast these opt-out players for quitting. That'll be part of it. But I understand it. We understand it. If you don't understand it, then you're not an American. You're not a human being. We get it. It's like when my kids used to misbehave, or you can fill in the blank with a number of these situations. When you allow someone to do something, when you allow Notre Dame to be an independent in football, don't blame them. Blame the system. Blame the rest of those morons that don't hold them accountable. When you see a kid acting up at the mall or at a restaurant, you don't blame the kid. That's the way they were raised. You blame the parents. right? So in this situation, it's not the player's fault. They're looking at dollar signs, and they should be. They should be looking out for themselves. But being part of an organization, being part of a team, being part of a group involves accountability. Therefore, you signed up for something. You are going to benefit from that. You are reaping the benefits. You also have to be responsible and have to be held accountable. So it's simple. This is what you do. And maybe some of you have better ideas than this, and I'm certainly welcome to them. And after I make this statement, we will get your calls here. So line up. A scholarship is a what? It's a contract. It's an agreement between the student athlete and the school. It is a contract. The scholarship is a contract. Simply state in the scholarship contract, you are receiving a scholarship, which involves a great education, which involves room and board, which involves books, which involves a training table that is better food than probably almost all of us eat on a daily basis, nutrition, workout, the state-of-the-art workout equipment, and travel and experiences that you would not have otherwise been able to experience. Traveling across the country, everything that's a benefit to the student athlete, that's the scholarship. That is what they receive. Okay, what you were giving is obviously your football talent, your ability, your effort, which is considerable. There's a lot of film study, a lot of work. It's a full-time job almost the entire year. And there's the risk of injury. Put in the contract, place in the contract, basically, that in exchange for this scholarship, you promise to return your football playing and your accountability for the entire season. And the season will end at the end of the regular season if we do not participate in postseason play. But if this team participates in postseason play, that's part of the season. So you need to show up for the game because it's a game in the season. It counts in the standings. So you need to show up for that game. And obviously, they're an American. They can do whatever they want. They can quit school. They can leave. And you say, fine, number one, you're not using our training facilities to prepare for the NFL draft. Number one. Number two, there's a stipulation here in the contract. Contract is not completed. I guess we could get really nasty and we could say that the contract has been broken and there could be legal ramifications, or we could just say, you know what? The portion here is worth this to this team, to this program to play in this bowl game. Therefore, you are going to have to pay back $50,000. Problem solved right there. All right. Welcome to the Voice of College Football, Mike. How you doing tonight?
Oh, pretty good, Mark. How you doing?
I am doing just fine. What's going on?
Is it just me, or have the Bulls kind of lost their appeal?
Oh, they've lost their appeal. Not for me in particular. They have slightly because I don't want to see, for example, I saw this today. I looked at the LSU Purdue game. No Aiden O'Connell, one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. No Charlie Jones, one of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten. No Corey Trice, their best defensive back. And one other player, one of their other best player. Oh, their tight end, Payne Durham. So 4 prominent Purdue players not playing against LSU.
Well,
I hate to see that.
Even if they were playing, do you really give them much of a shot against LSU?
LSU's not a great football team. Absolutely, I do.
Yeah, I think even at full strength, that's not a competitive game in my opinion.
Mr. Big Ten? I'm listening to Mr. Big Ten telling me that Purdue is going to get wiped out by LSU, and that's not a competitive game. The LSU team that lost to Texas A&M.
Yeah, the team lost at Texas A&M. I'm not. Even though they've improved, I'm not sold on their running game, and their defense is not that good.
Yeah, well, LSU's I feel like I've flipped the script here because I've been defending LSU for much of the season for turning in a pretty good season, but I don't think they're a significantly better team than Purdue. They're somewhat better. They're more talented, but I don't think they're better than Purdue, fully stocked.
And here's a question I have, and this is why I'm kind of done with the Bulls. What justification does anybody have for putting a 5-7 Rice in a bowl?
Well, here's the justification, because the powers that be are incapable of doing math. So the condition used to be you used to have, if you remember the old days, you used to have a winning record.
Yeah.
So you had to be 6-5. Well, then we went to an 11 game or a 12 game season, and they allowed a 500 record. Okay, so now we're down to 6-6. And then they added so many bowl games that when you've got 131 teams and you've got 41 bowls, you've got 82 slots to fill. Well, any math magician can say, basically, records can be configured anyway, but the law of averages tell us that if you're making 500 the standard, then roughly half the teams in the country are going to be above 500 and roughly half are going to be below. And obviously there's going to be a handful right at 6-6. Therefore, when you go to 82 spots out of 131, you are basically guaranteeing that you're going to need losing teams to play in bowl games.
Well, and some of that's going to be, modified by the fact that I'm not going to see any specific conferences, SEC, that play all the FCS teams, so they get, kind of a bump up there. So it's not just Division I, cannibalizing their own. But the thing, if you're going to put a 5-7 team in, why Rice?
Well, then it defaults to highest academic standards.
Oh, so is that what it is?
Yeah, there's an academic. I don't remember what it is. This went into play at right about the time. This went into play about 7 or 8 years ago when they determined, again, I believe I called them mathematicians is what I said, that this would become a problem. And so now I actually can agree with this portion of it, but it shouldn't come to this, that if there has to be a losing team involved in bowl play, that they would start by academic ranking of the 5-7 teams.
I was wondering, because isn't there another 5-7 team in the state of Texas that probably could draw a few more eyes?
Oh, well, forget about the state of Texas. There are 5-7 teams all over the place that are going to draw a lot more eyes. Michigan State, Miami.
Yeah, I was just referencing Texas A&M there because I think they're 5-7 after.
Texas A&M. Gotcha. Yeah. Shoot, we just named 3 that would do much better on TV than Rice, but Rice has smart guys on the football team.
Oh, so I wouldn't aware the academic thing for that.
So this will be the trivia question of the night. If anybody can name me the first 5-7 team to receive the academic nod to play in a bowl game. This was in about 2015.
Oh, I was thinking 14.
Might have been 14 or 15.
Sure.
I'm almost positive this is the right answer.
A couple in the chat are saying Rutgers. I thought Boston College.
No, that was last year. Rutgers was 5-7 last year, and Texas A&M opted out of the game against Wake Forest, and they had to go to a 5-7 team. That was Rutgers last year.
I thought Boston College got in at 5-7 one time, didn't they?
I don't believe so. Minnesota has, and the team that I'm thinking of has Rutgers last year. There's been a few other ones.
So I know UCLA got in at 6-7. They didn't want to, but I remember that UCLA, that was back when the Pac-12 was absolutely freaking terrible, and the Pac-12 South was won by a 6-6 UCLA, which was forced to, I think, take a butt whooping from I want to say Oregon.
Well, they didn't win the Pac-12. They went to the Pac-12 championship game.
They were forced to play that 13th game that they had absolutely no shot of winning. I think it was from that back when Oregon was a powerhouse. They had to take a loss.
The same thing happened to Georgia Tech. that the NCAA had to make a special dispensation to say you can go ahead and play in the conference championship game, and we will guarantee that even though you have a losing record after you get your butts kicked, that you can play in a bowl game. Same thing happened to Georgia Tech at 6-7 one year.
Yeah, whenever we start doing that, and it just means there's too many bowl games. We need to start getting rid of some of these.
Yeah, I don't argue with you in that I believe that you've got a valid point. I get it. Bowl games were originally created to reward teams that had successful seasons. And once we get down to 5-7, you're not successful. But for me, I wouldn't have an issue if every team in the nation played in a bowl game. I can't have enough bowl games.
So we put what UMass versus Hawaii or something.
Sure. If I've got nothing to do, I'll watch that game. Now I can't guarantee, because this year in particular, I've got quite a few obligations during bowl week. It's going to make it very difficult for me to watch. I'm going to be watching at like 4 a.m. My DVR is going to be filled up with games.
And see, to me, it's got to be really hard because, I mean, I assume it has to be for money, but then again, I mean, how much money can these games really draw? Like, I mean, sometimes I'll flip on whoever's playing in the Bahamas Bowl in a year, which is usually some 6-6 team versus another 6-6 team, and the stands, there's crickets there.
You're focused on the wrong thing, Mike.
What's that?
And I get it. You are doing what the typical college football fan does, and this makes sense unless you understand the television component. You're looking at the Bahamas Bowl, which is going to be played tomorrow between Miami of Ohio and UAB. So Who in the world's going to be traveling from those two schools?
Nobody.
Beyond anybody on campus. Yes, nobody. Who's going to show up from the area? Like 14 people. It's always a pathetic. The place doesn't even hold, like they play in this little dinky little stadium that I bet holds 6,000 or 7,000 people, and it's empty. There's like nobody there.
But what kind of TV revenue can it draw? Well, first of all,
it's on revenue.
It's on tomorrow, which means it's on a weekday.
TV revenue. Tons of TV revenue.
How come it's probably going to lose out to the freaking Young and Restless?
No, these bowl games do great TV ratings.
So some 6-6 team versus some 6-6 team in some junk bowl is going to really pull a Nielsen rating.
Every college football bowl game will outrate all but maybe 1 or 2 regular season college basketball games this year. And we see nothing but college basketball games on constantly. I remember when I left ESPN, we were doing like 348 or 370 college basketball games in a college basketball season. And every bowl game will outrate all of those games, unless it's maybe Duke, North Carolina.
I was going to say, I'd much rather see a top 10 Duke, North Carolina, or Michigan State, or Kentucky, Tennessee, if they're both.
America does not agree with you.
Texas, Baylor, that's just sad. I mean,
why?
I would rather see a top, if like 2 top 10 basketball teams were playing a good solid game. I'll take that over some welfare bowl between 2 teams that are in some group of 5 that eke through.
Okay, so how good do you have to be to make a bowl game?
I would like to see it to trim down the bowls to where I'd like it. I'd like to see a team no worse than 8-4 make a bowl.
8-4.
8-4.
Okay.
Because I mean, then at least we're going to be seeing some quality teams. Just trim it down to maybe so maybe what 20, 25 bowls.
Okay. I've got an easy response to your dilemma here.
Okay.
Don't watch.
And I don't. As a general rule, I don't watch too many bowls.
Okay.
Pre-Christmas.
You're also, I believe, a red-blooded American, right? That believes in supply and demand.
Yep.
That's why there are so many bowl games. If
Yeah.
the bowl game didn't make money, they wouldn't create another bowl game.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of surprises me. I just don't understand how these bowls are still making money.
TV. That's your short answer. That's the
Yeah.
only answer.
I guess I was just surprised that this much revenue is being made off of, two
Oh,
500 teams. I mean, it'd be one thing if it was a 6-6 Florida, 6-6 UCLA, six and
well,
six Baylor. But
sure.
who's watching the 6-6 UAB and 6-6 Southern Miss? I mean, you got to be really hurting. I mean, you got to be
Okay.
just be jonesing for some sort of football.
Yeah, people love football. So let's see. This game's going to be on ESPN, correct? So this first
Oh,
bowl game is going to be the Bahamas Bowl between Miami of Ohio and UAB at 11:30 in the morning. Okay. We're in the time of the sports season where there's all these college football, basketball, or these college basketball holiday tournaments going on. And I can tell you from the job I used to have where I could flip open an email every day when I got to work and look at the overnight ratings from the night before, this game's going to do like a 1.8 or something, meaning 1.8 times the number of households that are in the universe of America, which is about 113 million. So anyway, it's if it was 100 million, it'd be 1.8 million homes. So it's going to be like 2 million homes are going to be watching this game tomorrow. If that was a college basketball game, that rating would be like 0.2. It wouldn't be 1.8. It'd be like a ninth of the audience.
I'm surprised. I guess that thoroughly surprises me. I mean, you want to get into these New Year's Six games, or the other big ones like your Capital One, your Gator Bowl, and Liberty Bowl and stuff. I get that. I'm just surprised people are turning into the Duke's Mayo Bowl and the Bahamas
Oh,
Bowl and the Cure Bowl, and it's like these are these are
absolutely.
these are crap. I,
Absolutely.
I mean, I love football as much as the next person, but at some point in time, it just seems too much of a saturation.
Now, I know I'm an outlier, but if somebody said to me, Mark, you can watch the Bahamas Bowl between Miami of Ohio and UAB, or you can watch the NCAA men's basketball championship game, I'd watch this bowl game
Yeah, I can't relate to you on that one.
because I've lost complete interest in college basketball like 10 years ago. I haven't
At some
seen a game since.
at some point in time, I'd be tempted to turn on reruns of The Big Bang Theory over a bowl game versus nobodies. Like I
Well,
said, maybe that's just me.
I can't say that I haven't deviated away from bowl games to watch something else if it becomes 40-7 in the third quarter. But all right,
Okay.
man.
Well, I'll go ahead and step aside and let somebody else in.
I appreciate it, man.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, let's keep it rolling here. The voice of college football. We got the real MVP on the line.
Well, Mark. As a fan of a team that isn't named, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, I'll be honest, that kind of sounded like some elitism from Mike, just casting down on the rest of college football, saying, "How dare you 6-6, 7-5 teams have your fun in your bowl games? Only the Rose Bowl should matter," type thing.
Well, the difference we have to draw between bowl games and playoffs is that they're not playoffs. So we kind of think that, well, to make the playoffs, you have to have a good record. Sure, if you're the NFL, Major League Baseball, fill in the blank, that there should be some, there shouldn't be too many teams in the playoffs so that there's a standard, a high standard of making the playoffs. But these are just extra games being played. They're not playoff games. So,
Forget the playoff. I'm even taking the playoff games aside. Take those to the side because they're in a special category, I believe, on their own.
yeah,
I'm just talking about the 9-3 versus 10-2 bowl games. Those, the Alamo Bowl.
Yep.
Those type of games. I love the Alamo Bowl.
Yes.
But it doesn't sound like Mike would like the Alamo Bowl potentially for some
Texas
reason.
and Washington. How do you not like that?
I don't know, but I can't speak for him. But that was the impression I was getting, is he only likes the top tier bowl games from watching it. Now I could be wrong, and if I'm mischaracterizing his position, I apologize, but I'm not sure. So, Mark, I'm already hearing it about Florida, Ohio, Oregon State. Mark, if Florida loses by a lot, do you think the opt outs need to be factored into it?
Oh, this Florida Oregon State game. This is just going to be beautiful, regardless of the score, because we, of course, have a little back and forth between yourself and others in the chat that back the SEC, that love the SEC, or just flat out say, well, it's the best conference. And of course, our Pac-12 contingent. So it's rather amusing. So Oregon State's most likely going to win this game. At which point, any Oregon State supporter, Pac-12 supporter, should revel in that win and count it. It counts. But in a sense, if you're taking it into perspective, the other side, the SEC, almost can't lose, because either Florida is going to pull off an upset, either the second and third stringers at Florida are going to be able to outplay the starters at Oregon State, or if they lose, and even if they lose somewhat respectably, if they're able to maintain a pretty competitive game, it's hard not to judge it as, okay, fifth or sixth best team in the Pac-12, 10th or 11th best team in the SEC without a zillion players, and they lost 34-28. Wow.
Well, the thing I'm saying, let me phrase it in a different way.
Okay.
Florida beat Utah, and let's say Florida gets annihilated by
Did that
Oregon.
count, though?
Yes, it counts.
A lot of
All
people
results
aren't
count.
counting that. They thought it was a fluke.
Oh, all results must count, Mark. Otherwise, why are we going to evaluate the game?
Okay. I was told at one point, or maybe 1,000 points, that was a fluke.
Okay. But I count it. I count all results.
That's right.
I count all results. And I'm going to even go far as to say, even if Florida does okay, they keep it close, I'm going to knock Florida regardless, because they have so many opt-outs from I just don't like it. So they're already lesser in my mind because they don't want to show up for the game, or some players don't want to show up. But if Florida makes it close, or if Florida wins, then that's going to be a really good look. But if you compare this result to the Utah-Florida result, I think the Utah-Florida result is more legitimate than whatever this result's going to be, regardless of the outcome. Is that fair to say?
That the Florida win over Utah is more valid than them defeating Oregon State.
No, I'm just saying that game.
Yes.
The Florida-Utah game.
Yes.
Because everybody was playing in that game, is more valid of a result, regardless of what the result is, than the Florida-Oregon State result. Because some players aren't playing in the game.
Well, you can look at it that way, but you could also say if Florida would win this game without all those players, and the excuse of playing on the road cannot be used by either team, that this may be a more valid result. If their second and third stringers can win a game in a neutral site against a good Pac-12 team, then why is that not valid?
Well, I think it is valid, but I'm not saying it isn't valid. I'm just saying the result where everybody's playing is more valid.
Yeah, okay. I get your point, but I also would make the point. I get your point. I understand your point, and I think it's a valid point. I also would just counter with, if you take the best players off a team, and I haven't gone through the entire Florida roster to see, I know the count's like 20 or 25 players. and I got to think they're mostly the best players, that that speaks volumes of the depth and the talent of that team to be able to still win the game without the best players.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Mark. That's actually why I'm looking forward to the Cure Bowl with UTSA versus Troy.
Yeah.
I believe this is the only conference champion versus conference champion bowl matchup this season.
Is it really?
I believe both teams won their conferences. So this, if that's true, which hopefully somebody will verify it.
Yeah.
I think this would be a great comparison for the group of 5.
Yeah.
To determine which conference is better than the other conference.
Although I got to say, when 2 teams are this good in the group of 5, I would like to see them play Power 5 teams. Like, I would love to see them play roughly 5th place teams in a Power 5 conference. I would like to see Texas San Antonio play Oklahoma State and Troy play South Carolina.
Yeah, those would be interesting matchups, but I think I believe personally that there's a big gap between the Power 5 and the Group of 5. So,
Absolutely,
Mark,
there is. These
I
are
want to see good competitive football games first and foremost.
As I stated off,
I don't think either of those matchups would be competitive or good just because of the gap between the Power 5 and the Group of 5.
We have certainly had competitive matchups between the Power 5 and the Group of 5.
Oh, I'm not saying there hasn't been exceptions, but I'm saying general. Yeah. The general trend is that most Power 5 teams are better than most of the Group of 5 teams.
Well, of course they are, but these aren't fair matchups. Therefore, they're most. I bet if we went through all the Power 5 matchups against Group of 5 matchups in the history of the bowls, let's say over the last 20 years, that the Group of 5 has done fairly well because their champions are playing 7th place teams in the Big Ten or whatever conference. And I'm just proposing the same thing.
Right. Okay. I mean, I would imagine the Group of 5 for the last few years has done particularly well against one certain Power 5 conference, Mark. I'm not going to name the Power 5 conference, but maybe that Power 5 conference can get a win in 2 days with Florida, Oregon State. Maybe. But let me ask you, which slate of games this weekend are you looking forward to the most? You had to watch just one bowl game.
Okay, if I could only watch one bowl game. See, I'm struggling with this Florida-Oregon State matchup because if they were at full strength, that would be the slam dunk selection. However, that game aside, I want to see, I'll go, that's actually pretty tough at the top. I'll go Cincinnati, Louisville 1. I'll go Texas San Antonio, Troy 2. Then I'm going with Washington State, Fresno State 3. And I am saying those 3 are far above the other ones. I really want to see all 3 of those games. And then, the other ones, whatever. SMU, BYU, I guess would be next. And the other ones I will watch. I will DVR if I'm not available to watch all of them. I will tape all of them and watch them just because that's who I am. But the rest of them don't move me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to BYU SMU. I think that could be a good competitive football game. And Mark, I'm reading your chat, and Tim Prangley made a comment that says the Pac is the second best conference this year. Mark, do you remember your video you released about the conference rankings?
Yes.
Where'd you have them? 4th?
3rd.
3rd, okay. I have them. I think they're 3rd as well. I think they're going to finish 4th behind the Big Ten. But right now, I agree with them being 3rd.
What's funny is that I have been very gracious to the Pac-12 in ranking them 3rd over the Big Ten at number 4, because if actually, for all the criticism that the Big Ten has taken, the Big Ten has a better record outside the conference this season than the Pac-12 does, both against the Power 5 and against everybody else. The Big Ten is they have played better. They have won more games and have a better winning percentage outside the conference than the Pac-12. And I
Yeah,
truly
I
believe
think
that the
maybe
Big
it's
Ten's
just
a better
because of
conference than the
when you're a conference that hasn't been living up to its own standard for so long, and then you go back up to that standard.
Yeah.
The gap of improvement is noticeable. And I think people are drawn by that gap as compared to just steadily being consistent. And I think the Big Ten is more of a consistent conference.
And I am very upfront and transparent about doing my best and attempting to be unbiased. However, I would say maybe I was swayed by the Pac-12. Number one, the point that you just made. I have been swayed by the Pac-12's great improvement, that I've been blinded somewhat by this jump of improvement, that I have overrated the Pac-12 possibly. And number two, that the games are exciting. Now, excitement doesn't necessarily mean quality. So the games are exciting and the teams are exciting and they're close. So I've been wowed by a lot of good teams playing each other in really good games. But that doesn't mean that they're good. That doesn't mean that they're better than another conference.
Yes, and also something I think people are drawn to for some reason is the teams at the top of a conference.
Yeah, sure.
But not the teams at the mid or bottom of a conference, which is very strange to me. People always go to, well, what's your top 2 teams or your top 5 teams? Well, I mean, every team matters as equally as the team below it, if you're looking at the totality of the conference. So I don't know why we just skip certain teams.
Yes, we're drawn to the top. You know, for example, let's say the Big Ten is the worst conference, but let's say Ohio State and Michigan aren't part of that equation. They're 2 of the top 4 teams. Let's say they are legitimately 2 of the top 4 teams, but the rest of the conference is just awful. Both can be true. The rest of the conference can be awful. And Ohio State and Michigan could play in the national championship game, and one of them could win the national championship. That doesn't make the Big Ten the best conference.
Right. And the problem, I think, for the Pac-12 is some of the teams at the bottom aren't great. Arizona State, Colorado, Stanford, those aren't good teams.
No.
Those are as much as a negative marker as USC, UCLA, Utah, I would say is a positive for the Pac-12. What do you think about that?
Well, I think every conference has really bad teams. The SEC has less of them, and their really bad teams are like Auburn, and Auburn's not horrible compared to some of the teams that you just mentioned. But, the Big Ten certainly has its Northwestern, Rutgers, Indiana contingent, and the ACC has Virginia Tech, BC this season, and again the SEC after Vandy. I guess Texas A&M's a kind of a bad team, and then of course to your second point about people just looking at the top of the conference, the only reason I think that there is some validity in that is, for example, you've got conferences like the Big 12 that is so balanced that, and I think this is going to be even more so going into the future once they add those 4 teams from the American Conference in BYU, that the conference is going to be very strong and deep and decent, but there's not going to be anybody on the high end to challenge the elites from the other conferences for a national championship. But they're going to be really deep and strong to deliver a lot of 8-4 teams that are going to be decent teams.
Right. I mean, what is the worst team in the Big 12 this year? Iowa State or West Virginia?
Yeah, they're not horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, nationally, they're probably top 60 teams?
60? Yeah.
70, somewhere around there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not horrible compared to other of the bottoms. So I think it goes SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, Big 10, ACC. That's my top 5.
Yeah.
For anybody that might care about that. And plus Iowa State having that big win against Iowa, for where the conference standings turned out to be. I mean, that was a huge draw for the Big 12.
That was a fluke.
But it's still a result that counts.
No, it was a fluke.
Why do you say that?
First of all, I'm just kidding. Secondly, I'm using that can be the opt-out for any result you want to change or invalidate. You can just, well, it was a fluke.
Oh, I get you now. I get you. I think you may be doing a full circle type thing with the
Yes.
Utah-Florida conversation piece
That was a
earlier.
fluke.
Okay, I got you. Well, do you think there's going to be any fluky results in these bowl games?
Oh, they're going to be fluke results all over the place.
Okay.
I'm going to have a heck of a time trying to predict those. And I get the whole fluke. That there is such a thing as okay, I'll give you a perfect example. Purdue beat Ohio State 3 years ago. Ohio State was 13-1, won all this other stuff. Purdue was 6-7. There's no comparison between the two teams over the course of a season. So is Ohio State still better than Purdue? Yes, because they proved it for 13 games. But on that night, Purdue beat them soundly. So if that has to count, it counts. Purdue showed that they can beat Ohio State, that it's possible. Akron couldn't do that. So they're at least show that they're capable. And I guess also what makes that more of a what actually makes that more of a fluke is that Ohio State proved to be much better against the same competition within the same conference, as opposed to Utah and Florida, where Florida goes back and plays the SEC and Utah goes and plays in the Pac-12. So we've got nothing else to go on really between those two conferences.
Yeah, well, did you watch much of the Pac-12 show last night?
A little bit.
Okay, well, there was a part for Tim, I believe he was the one that mentioned it, was since that Utah didn't play Washington, that we don't know for sure that Utah is the best team in the Pac-12, Mark.
Well, we've got Tim here. So we'll bring Tim in and we can imagine this. So let me make 2 quick points before we cut Tim loose. So again, as is somewhat typical between two very knowledgeable people, I get both of your points. Darreel's point is that all these teams play each other. They play a 9-game conference schedule. There's all these games against each other, and Utah went through the process of playing the full season and a conference championship game, and at the end, they're the champion. So why aren't they considered the best team? Obviously, we can go through all sorts of different conferences year to year and make all sorts of examples of, let's say, Kansas State this year. Were they the best team in the Big 12? Probably not, maybe, in a number of examples. So I get both sides of that. All right, Tim.
No, I mean, I'm listening, really.
And,
So let me be very clear. There is a champion of the Pac-12. They are the Utah Utes. They earned it. They won it on the field. Period. Let's get that out of the way. But Utah got into that game in a 3-way tie.
Yeah.
And so here's why I take umbrage with we start hearing about, well, this is the 8th best team and they beat the best team in the Pac-12. The best team doesn't always win the conference. And here's the weird thing. Utah beat USC, but Oregon beat Utah. So, I mean, and they were tied. They had the same schedule. They right? And they end up going, what Mark?
Close game, and it was at Autzen.
Well, USC lost a close game in Salt Lake City. I mean, you win the game, right?
Sure.
Winning the game.
To Darreel's point, Utah not only won the Pac-12 championship game, they played a dominant second half.
Fourth quarter, not second half. It was a 3-point mark. It was a 3-point game, 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Really, if you look at the score in the USC game and Utah game, and you look at that Michigan OSU game, USC at some points in that game were actually as close, if not closer, than OSU down the stretch. I mean, the Buckeyes scored what, a touchdown in the second half?
Field goal.
Field goal. SC got a touchdown in the second half. I'm not really going down that rabbit hole, but I don't want to talk about that game. So that game, like, we can go around and talk for centuries about it, but let's just put it this way. It's injuries happen as part of football, but it's not like Utah dominated USC. It's Utah dominated USC on that day. And the game is a game of football. They were given an opportunity. They absolutely took care of it, and they kicked the crap out of USC down the stretch. That's a fact. But it's also a fact that it was, one score game. And a matter of fact, it's kind of weird. Almost like when CJ Stroud was driving really late in that game and threw that interception. It would have been a one score game, right? A 7-point game. Caleb on one leg was driving down the field, threw an interception about the 8-yard line. I'm about to make it a 3-point game. So there's a lot that goes into these games.
Sure.
I would not say that Utah dominated the second half. I would say that USC was just had an injured quarterback and made them very one-dimensional. So anyway, going way back to this, forget that game. Utah is a great team, but we cannot say that Utah is the best team. Huh?
They're not great.
Utah's not a great team?
Depending on how you define the word great, I don't consider Utah a great team.
I would say Utah is a top 10 team. That's a great team. When there's 131 teams,
maybe,
and you're in the top 10, does that make you a good team?
Yeah, they're a good team. I don't think great teams typically lose 3 times.
What if your losses are to good to great teams?
Like
they lost to a good UCLA team.
Yeah,
they had that weird loss. They had that weird loss at the beginning of the season, but anybody that follows football knows that they start slow. I mean, if there's one thing on Whittingham, if you really want, before we put him on the Mount Rushmore of coaching, and I know no one is, I'm being hyperbolic, but his good teams tend to start out slow for some unknown reason. Year in, just seems like year in and year out. And anyway, you've been downgrading the Utes all year, Mark. Don't even say you haven't, because you have. You really
not. Well, when
really
they come out of the gate and they lose to Florida, and then Florida proceeds to do what I need to evaluate the teams and their performance and results on the field, not say, that was a fluke. We'll let it go. You know what? Ohio State losing to Michigan. Fluke, they're number 1. I can't do that.
How about Ohio State losing to Oregon at home last year?
I ranked them behind Oregon because of it.
Was it a bad team? Was that a bad... Well, I wouldn't say it's a great team last year.
Oregon was better record-wise than Florida is this year. They went to the Pac-12 championship game.
Didn't Oregon lose to Stanford? That
they went to the Pac-12 championship game.
Pretty sure they lost to Stanford too, though.
Sure, and Florida did not go to the SEC championship game. Nor did they have a chance of going anytime after like the last week of September.
So here's my point. Are you telling me, you can tell me, Mark, that Utah is the best team in the Pac-12? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't know that. But they won the championship. Therefore, if we were going to decide who is the best team in the Pac-12, well, Utah did the most to show us that they are the best team. Who would be the best team otherwise? USC, who Utah beat twice?
Well, again, we can talk about both those games, Mark. Anytime you want to talk, I don't want to denigrate. I don't want to take away from what Utah's done. But anyone says that Utah was a better team than USC this year, I would argue with them. They won the game. They took advantage of the situation that was presented and won the game on the field, and they are the champs. But I've been watching sports long enough to know that the best teams don't always win. That's one. Well, 2, Oregon beat Utah. So how come they're not the best team? Because they didn't play the championship game because of a tiebreaker?
Yeah, okay. So you had this tiebreaker system that occurred.
I know.
Every team in the Pac-12 agree to the tiebreaker system before the season started?
Of course they did.
Then then by definition, okay, the two best. There was no divisions, right? There was no divisions. They selected the two best teams
Correct.
based on
Absolutely.
this tiebreaker season. So we had the two best teams in the Pac-12
No,
play
no,
based on what the Pac-12's criteria was.
no.
And Utah won
You
the
had
game.
the two teams. No. You're conflating two words. Again, you're saying the two best with the two teams playing in the championship game, which can't always be the same thing.
Yeah, but they don't have divisions this year, right? The Pac-12.
I think you're missing my point. Let me restate it because I didn't make it very clear then. I'm saying to you that all the teams, of course, they decided what the tiebreakers were. But given the tiebreakers and two teams move to a championship game, that does not make them the two best teams. It makes them the two teams playing in the game.
So
You understand?
Tim, what would your evaluation of this statement be? I think Ohio State's the best team in the Big Ten.
In the Big Ten?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I would probably disagree, but why do you think they're the best team, Mark? That's why I would just say the phrase, back it up with some support.
The point I'm making is that, let's say in Georgia's case, I think it would be extremely difficult for anyone to argue that they are not the best team in the SEC. But we have other situations in other conferences, like the Pac-12 is probably the prime example, where we can have all sorts of debates about who the best team is. Oregon, USC, Utah, UCLA, etc., because they won games against each other. However, to DeReal's point, there's a system in play that I don't believe determines for sure that Utah is the best team in the Pac-12. But that certainly is the best indicator of who is the best team that won the conference championship and defeated the team that most people thought was the best team twice.
Yeah. Again, many people still argue they are still the best team. But what I would say to you is that it didn't pick the determination and the way that the tiebreakers work and etc. It's because we play these stupid 12 team leagues that everyone doesn't play each other, which totally screws everything up. There was a system in place that placed USC and Utah in the championship game. That system did not prove that either one of them are the best team in the league. Can we all agree on that? They don't want to argue that point because I think it's pretty it's factual.
How many games do we need to play before we determine the best team?
Well, would you say that? Well, let's go back to that then. You just told me that. Do you really believe that? Or are you just saying that? Do you believe that Ohio State? But do you believe so? You believe Michigan's the better team?
Hold on. Can I ask a question?
No, hold on one second. So, Mark,
Okay.
would you say that would you say that Michigan is the better team? That they're better than Ohio State?
Based on what I've seen, yes, but not by much.
Oh, okay. So here's the thing. We watched USC and Utah play each other, correct? Back in Salt Lake earlier in the year. And it played just down to the wire. Both teams putting up 43 and 42 points with healthy quarterbacks. Then you lose one quarterback in the first play of the second drive. And in the fourth quarter, it's still a 3-point game with 10 minutes left. And with about 7 minutes left, there was an interception on the 8-yard line that led to that would probably have made it a 3-point game. We have Oregon who beat Utah by 1 point or 10 points. They beat them. And you're going to tell Duck fans that Utah is better than Oregon?
Well, wait a minute. You're giving context to all these other games, the USC and Utah games. Then there needs to be context placed to the Utah-Oregon game and not just say, well, they beat them. It doesn't matter. They beat them in Autzen, a very difficult place to play on a Saturday night in an extremely close game.
Well, I didn't bring up after we played in Salt Lake, which is probably a harder place to play.
There you go. So if Utah would have
I
played
left that out. I'm leaving that out. I'm leaving that out. I'm talking about an injury to starting quarterback. So I'm talking about that's a little bit different than the home field advantage. Wouldn't you agree?
But aren't injuries a part of the game?
On the first play, the second drive is a little more important than than playing on the road, whether it's at Autzen or wherever.
Tim,
No,
in an
what I'm trying to make the
idealistic
point is
world,
it's really simple. It's really simple. I don't know that Utah's not the best team. That's what I'm going to say to you right now. Maybe Utah is. My opinion, I don't think they are. I would think a lot of Duck fans out there would say, hey, hold on. Yeah, fine. We beat them at home, but we beat them. You know? So why is anyone tell us that we're not better? Because they're the champions. And just because the system's in place and everyone agreed to it does not make that team better. It just means that's the team that's going to go to the game. We all agree on that.
Well, let's also understand that anytime there's a conference champion who has at least one loss, then we can have this argument that they're not the best team because somebody beat them. Somebody out there beat them. Right?
There was a 3-way tie, Mark. And one of those and again, the way this tiebreaker worked out was the fact that a team that won head-to-head, which is really bizarre. Anyway, what I want to talk about was this. You guys are talking about the Pac-12. I don't really care about USC, Utah. Congratulations, Utes.
wait, I got to ask you a question, Tim.
You get to finish up what you want to say, but I'm really, that wasn't even what I was calling.
Okay, I was going to ask you a question. Who's the best team in the Big 12?
Best team in the Big 12. Flip a coin between TCU and Kansas State.
Because I thought it would be interesting.
I don't know this TCU. I don't know. I bet you those guys played 10 times. I think it's gonna be 6-4, 5-5, 4-6. It's gonna be really close.
So we're going to go to a playoff structure where you believe teams that are going to get guaranteed playoff spots if they win their conference. Well, because the top 5 Power 5 teams get a guaranteed playoff spot, and they might not even be the best teams within their conference.
Yeah, but here's what I'm gonna say to you: how often does that happen? How often do you have a 3-way tie for second place? How often does that happen?
Well, this is the first year of the Pac-12 not having a division, so I don't know how often it's going to happen in the future.
Here's the reason why a lot of us that really have this take. I'll say it. We have this take on football is there's a lot of people that go around talking about their conference is the best and then exclude entire conferences out of the conversation when they don't even play each other or they play 1 or 2 games a year. The reason why you want conference champions, and by the way, if you're a Georgia, right? If you're a Clemson, if you're an Ohio State, if you're a Michigan, the reason why you want the Pac-12 and the Big 12 in there is so that you don't have people saying, we were just left out. We were the better team. I don't think you need to see rematches in playoffs, to real. At the expense of leaving entire conferences out. Now, if that conference has like a 3-loss team, etc., in our current set with 4 people, I think the 4 correct teams are in this year. But I also think that I do have a problem with the fact that, let's face it. I mean, I know Mark's probably not going to listen, Buckeyes are like, but you guys had your shot and they beat you. You know, why would we leave? Why would we want to leave a whole conference out again to give a team a second shot at beating the team that already beat them? I don't know. And I would swear to God, I'd be saying the same thing if it was USC. I would, because the logic is sound. You know, I think that you need to put conference champions in, or otherwise, why are we even playing? You know, why don't we just make SEC champion the national champion?
I don't think the SEC should always be the national champion, but
you sure?
Can't we say USC had their shot against Utah in the conference championship game and they lost?
USC has no right to be in the playoff. I didn't think they had a right to be in the playoff, quite frankly, until the losses happened at the end of the season. Because the way it shook out, I thought USC should get a shot at it. But I think it was going to be a shot in the dark if they even got in, that they'd have a chance at winning their first round game. But the way things went down and dropped, yeah, I mean, of course they were should have been there. But when they lost that championship game, absolutely not. Why? Because they weren't the conference champion. So why would they be in that game?
So are you saying you only want the conference champions?
In a perfect world, here we go. If you left it up to me, it would be a 5-team playoff. 5 and 4 play each other for a chance to play into what we now have. Because we have 5 Power 5 conferences. 5 and 4 play. So you're mad because you weren't ranked, 3 and you're ranked 4?
Between 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Who does that?
It can't be perfect, Mark. I mean, at some point you're going to have to decide, right? how are we to do? We have 5 teams. That's the problem. We shrunk down to 5. If they would have kept it at 8 conferences, we could have 8 conferences play each other, 8, 10 team conferences. But, that ended with the Big East and Southwest Conference. All these conferences getting swallowed up by the bigger conferences. Once that happened, there is no clean way to do it. But what you can do, the closer you can make it, is take the 5 conference champions, which will be a play-in game. So so you're looking at the playoff would be the conference, the championship games of the Power 5. So there's really 10 teams playing, right? So there's 10 teams playing, and then 5 and 4 would play each other. And you're right. I guess 4 would be pissed off, or 5 because heck, how come we're not number 3? Well, I mean, you should have had a better resume. And so it's the closest thing. This 12 team playoff is going to be fun and inclusive and wonderful, but it's going to be watered down. It's going to be some watered down football. But what I just talked about, having 5 conference championship games, decide 5 conference champions, 5 and 4 play in. To me, that's the cleanest, most objective way to find an actual champion, because everybody knows what they have to do, and everyone at the very beginning of the season does it on the field.
So wait. So Tim, let me ask you this: Pitt a few years ago was 7-5 and made their conference championship game because of the division they were in. If they won against, I think it was Clemson, you say they should have been in the playoffs with 5 losses?
Go ahead. Sorry, I missed what you said. What?
Okay, so Pitt a few years ago was 7-5, but because of the division they played in.
Listen. I will tell you. Yes, you know why? Because who'd they beat? They beat Clemson. Like you said,
they would have had to beat Clemson.
Tight, man. I couldn't tell you the ACC wound up, a couple years ago. I don't know. Here's what it is, though: win your damn conference, and you have no problem.
So you're telling me a team that has 5 losses, which is almost half of the regular season, should still have a chance at the playoffs?
Because here's the point: if that 5-loss team wins the next 3 or 4 games and wins the national champion, then they're national champion. Or they lose and they're out. What is your point?
I want to see. I don't think a team with 5 losses should ever make the college football playoff in any circumstance.
You think the playoff is an invitational. Okay?
I just want to see the best teams.
Okay.
I don't want to see guaranteed playoff spots.
I want to see a national championship that's won on the field.
I do. I saw it last year. Alabama beat.
I totally get your point. You don't have to go down this road again. I get it. You always want to see the 4 best teams rematch and play each other again. I get it. Here's where I find that flawed. It's happened in the past. It happened to Georgia, right? It's happened to Alabama. If you win in the regular season, why do you have to win again?
Because those teams were determined to be better than the other teams
in the country. And dude, I'm telling you, here's the point. It was already played. They won.
So you would rather have a team that is substantially, what I believe is substantially worse.
Dude, win your conference.
Well, yes, but not all conferences are created equal.
It doesn't matter. Okay. The idea here is we're fighting a national champion. Do you understand? Not to make something entertaining in the playoffs. The goal of the playoff is not a tournament, is not an invitational where we bring the 5 best teams. You take the winners of conferences and you play them against each other to find out who's the best. That is how you find a national champion. Not making a team that's already beat a team, beat them again. And if the other team beats them, then they're the champion. So they're 1-1 and the other team's the champion because we're calling it a playoff. No,
well,
that's horseshit.
Well, Tim, while I agree with your reasoning about the conference champions, I would love to see more conferences and 8 conference champions play. We spent the first 15 minutes here talking about they're the best, even though they didn't win, they could still be the best. Well, we've got a situation this year where we've got Utah winning a conference after a 9-3 regular season, and Ohio State over here at 11-1, and Utah would make the playoff as a champion, and Ohio State would be left out. Couldn't Ohio State say, why don't you win your games and not lose 3 of them?
Because you played a conference, Mark.
I'm just using your logic
because Ohio State
a few minutes ago.
Because we don't know how Ohio State
would the best.
I got you, but Mark, do we know that Ohio State would have won those 3 games that Utah lost? The problem is they don't play the same teams. All right, there's nothing perfect in any of this. And we can do it. And Daryl, the way you're describing it, if that's what you want, then I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. If you want to have it where we think, and by the way, why not just go back to the polls? Because if we think, these teams play each other. They play different styles of football. They rarely play each other in mass numbers. We have a pretty good idea. Look at what we thought about beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year, who the best teams are. We don't know even now, to be honest with you, because has Michigan played Georgia yet? We don't know which one's better. I think Georgia's better. Should I give Georgia the national champion because I think they're better than Michigan? I don't know.
No,
So
I think it should be played on the field, the national championship.
That's why it should be decided on the field, so that we know that the SEC champion, boom, they're going to the playoff. We know that the Big Ten champion, boom, they're going to the playoff. There's no thinking about it. We know the Big 12 champion is going to playoff. ACC going to championship. The Pac-12 going to championship. Now we have 5 champions out of the 10 best teams in the 5 conferences who've all played each other. And then those 5 teams, 2 play in, and then the others. I would love someone to tell me a better system than that. I'm still waiting to hear it. Oh, I think that SEC has the 3 best teams in the country. So we're going to put 3 SEC teams in, and let's throw a Big 10 team in, and we'll call it a championship. That's not a championship, man. Sorry.
Listen, if in an ideal world with the representation being equal, I would agree with it. But we don't live in an ideal world. And the problem is there are just some conferences that I believe are significantly better than other conferences. And I don't think they should automatically be guaranteed the same playoff.
You said, I believe.
I'm about as sure as if I drop a pen, it will fall to the ground.
It is, Tim, you got to admit, it is based on results on the field that the SEC has proven to be the best conference.
Were we talking Tennessee as like one of the top, the playoff teams a couple of weeks ago? You know what I mean? That's what it felt like. You believe that they're the best team. We think these teams are the best.
Based on the results on the field, don't you think Tennessee's a pretty good team?
Here's the reality of it. There's a pretty good chance, right? There's a pretty good chance in any given playoff the teams are going to get smoked. It just happens almost historically. A couple teams or a team's going to get smoked in the playoffs. Why not have it? I just don't get why people want to fight this. It's like, well, I want to put 2 or 3 teams from one conference in there. Dude, if I was Georgia right now, I'm like, dude, bring on those Pac-12 pansies. I love to play the Big 12 and smack them around, etc. I won my conference. I already beat the teams in my conference. Michigan fans, why are you saying, why do we got to play Ohio State again? We just beat them. Why do we got to play them and be the national champions? See, to me, that's the part of it I just can't get my head around. Please explain me why you got to win a game in a playoff that you already decided in the regular season.
Well, we don't know. We don't know for sure Ohio State and Michigan are going to play one another. So Ohio State's argument would be that they beat Georgia. And so they had to go through a team to make it. It wasn't like Michigan and Ohio State were selected to play in the national championship game. If that was the case, I would agree with you.
Multiple teams from one conference in. What is it? Because I want to see the 4 best teams. You don't know the 4 best teams. We think we know the 4 best teams. What's so difficult to get our heads around on that?
I think, Tim, the problem you're having is I don't think there's enough games humanly possible to where we can systematically determine the rankings of every single team. So there's going to have to be some level of assumption baked in of regardless of the scenario.
No, hang on. Why do we have to have that?
Because there's not enough games played.
So then you play your conference, win it, and move on.
But you said at the beginning of the discussion, if you win your conference champion, they might not be the best team.
Correct. But you know what?
Do you not see how that contradicts what you just said?
Because it's not about having guaranteed the 4 best teams. What it is having a national champion decided on the field.
So you want a national champion that might not be the best team in the country?
Opinions. You want a beauty pageant to where we think we have the prettiest girls coming into right, and we're going to see which one's the prettiest at the end. I want to have to where you have football teams play a game, and if they win their conference, then they get to fight each other out to see whose conference and whose team is the best. That's the way it should be, period. And by the way, someone in the chat, Sad Saman, but I love that, by the way. It's been hilarious for about a week now. I was adamant. Mark might even remember. I've been constantly saying about the Georgia-Alabama thing. Constantly, I've been on that. I don't think teams should have to rematch each other to win a national champion. I don't. It's already been handled. I've been very consistent in that.
So, Tim, everything that you just said makes sense except for two items. One would be, and I'm not going to go through the whole process again, but we spent the first 15 minutes having this argument over championships versus who the best teams are. That doesn't quite corroborate with what you're saying now. But the biggest point is that in the current 5-conference system, you would want all the conference champions and no one else. So that's 5. Somebody still needs to make a determination of the 1 through 5 seeds, which is going to be a major disadvantage to seeds 4 and 5.
Yep. But so would be picking the 4 best teams that we think are the 4 best teams when none of them have played each other. So there's always going to be a level of objectivity. I'm trying, Mark, to reduce as much of that subjectivity out and make it as objective as possible. And again, it depends on what you want. If you want high ratings, you want these great games between great SEC teams, then go for it. At some point, the rest of the country will be like, like NASCAR. Hey, I know you guys enjoy that stuff, but we don't care. So
hold on. Why are you throwing the SEC in there? If Michigan played Ohio State for the national championship this year because Ohio State beat Georgia 40-38, let's say, I wouldn't have an issue with it. I just want to see great teams play. I want to see great games. And if it happens to be Ohio State, Michigan, go for it. And, you're bringing up NASCAR. I mean, do you remember a sport that changed its playoff structure and then lost significantly viewership?
I don't care about NASCAR. Let's not go down that road, please. I don't really give a crap, to be honest.
The last point I'm going to make, then we're going to let Will talk. The last point I'm going to make is when we talk about not knowing which are the best teams and us just guessing who those best teams are based on assumption or history or whatever.
Or resume, et cetera, yeah.
Resumes. Let's also understand that if we went year to year through the current college football playoff era, that as I scan it, and I got a pretty good memory of who beats who and by how much, the teams that have played a big non-conference opponent and won those games have advanced to the playoff, and the teams that have had that shot against a big non-conference opponent and lost that, has always burned them, and they have not been given a shot, i.e. the last 2 Pac-12 champions that played an SEC team, Auburn, in non-conference play, they lost to Auburn. Then at the end of the year, boom, they're left out of the playoff. They had their shot and they didn't deliver. So they were left out of the playoff.
Oops, I meant to start that. Sorry. Yeah. It comes down to what you want. I'm not telling anybody how to run their playoff. I'm not. It's just 2 different criteria that we have. Dureel, I respect the fact that you want to have what you believe to be the best teams play each other. Fair enough. Right? What I would like to see happen is that we have 5 Power 5 conferences. We've oh, sorry, Will. My bad. Sorry, Mark. I thought Will. Hi, Will. Sorry. I'm not gonna repeat it.
Hey, Tim.
How's it going, Will?
Pretty good. I sure did. That was just disparaging remark, but well, you can keep going.
Bring a logical viewpoint to all this, Will. Where do you stand on this, or whatever you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, where does the man that has an independent team stand on only conference championships making it to the playoffs?
There you go.
I really don't like that. But we
Notre
do have
Dame's just going to be playing
class.
a football season for the heck of it, and that's going to be the end of their year. We went 12-0. We can't make it.
Just like Ohio
they would
State
join a conference. So they would finally have to join a conference, which, by the way, everyone on this panel is probably saying, except Will, say, yeah, about damn right you joined a conference, but there's that. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah. But I mean, I was here to talk about the bowl games, but now I kind of want to hop in. Tim, you said that Utah's isn't a better team than USC, but Utah beat you guys twice. I think a team that beats another team twice is definitely the better team. Like, I know the first game was sketchy with the refs, and there was Caleb's injury in the second game, but I feel like if you get beaten twice by the same team, I feel like you do have to call the other team better.
I respect my opinion. I respect your opinion. I think how I would bridge that would say is I think that Utah was the better team on that day in the championship game. And I think USC got screwed by the refs in the first game. That's me being honest.
All right.
If you want me to be honest. Now, does that make Utah the better team? That's up to you to decide. To me, that first game was clearly bad. And in the second game, we lost the heart. So see, it's kind of like the linchpin of your team. It's not like we lost one player. You know what I mean? I said at the very beginning, USC's offensive line, it's a bit spotty. We were already out with our, we had a first team All-American left guard us out of that game. And so Caleb was running for his life, but he's Caleb and he was picking up yards and he was doing wonderful stuff. He's a difference maker, obviously. That's why he won the Heisman Trophy. So on that day, without Caleb Williams, Utah was definitely the better team, without a doubt.
Now, Will, let me change it a little bit, okay? I want you to insert Tim's arguments
Hey,
and
Tyndall,
replace the words
Hey,
USC.
Tyndall, you got a big mouth in the chat. Why don't you come talk to me, buddy? Put your camera on and come have a conversation like a big boy. Because there's always, Mark knows about the little yappies that run their mouth in the chat and leave comments. There's always a Tyndall in the crowd. Tyndall, come on here and let's have a conversation instead of being, I don't know, whatever you're doing. This guy is delusional. Thank you for backing that up with some facts. I might be wrong, but I'm far from delusional, child. Yeah.
So, Will, I want you to replace what Tim said about USC and having, played Utah, and Utah was the better team on that day. Caleb Williams was the linchpin, and him being injured affected the game. I want you to replace the word USC with Tennessee, and I want you to replace Caleb Williams with Hendon Hooker. Okay?
Okay.
And could that not explain away the South Carolina game?
No, it can't, because South Carolina, right, scored on 9 of 10 possessions. Let that sink in for a second. That had nothing to do with Hendon Hooker. They scored on 9 of 10 possessions. Go ahead. I'd like to hear your rebuttal.
Sorry, I'm just looking. The Utah versus USC score was 47-24.
Mm-hmm.
The Tennessee versus South Carolina score was 63 to 38.
Mm-hmm.
So if we did some quick math, that'd be a 25-point margin of victory over here and a 23-point margin of victory over here. That's pretty comparable, in my opinion.
I don't think so, because I don't think Utah and South Carolina are comparable, but go ahead.
Well, that's all I was going to say. I personally think they're I don't think they're worlds apart, but I think Utah is a better team.
What? Okay, come on, man. Seriously, stop. Okay.
Well, they're not worlds apart. South Carolina lost
apart,
4
but
games.
one is decidedly better than the other.
Games in a much lesser conference.
Who are Utah's losses to, Mark?
Florida. Florida. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Florida. It's one. They lost to Oregon and they lost to UCLA.
Okay, so good teams. Who did South Carolina lose to the week before they beat?
They lost to Florida.
By how many points, Will?
A lot.
A lot. South Carolina is a bad team, guys.
South Carolina is a bad team.
They've
not a bad
gotten better the past.
You don't beat
the last 2
Clemson
weeks.
and Tennessee. They've got 2 wins that are better than. Oh my goodness! There's not a big gap between Utah and South Carolina. There can't be, because South Carolina plays in a significantly better conference. I think everyone that knows football knows that.
If the game was at Rice Eccles,
have I ever? And by the way, the significantly part, I'm not sure about significant. They are the best conference in football, but this year I don't think that they're significantly better than other conferences.
Decidedly better.
Decidedly better. I would say there's no argument that they're the best, but it's not like they're the NFL. You know what I mean? Let's not go to that level. And so what my only point would be, we keep going in circles on this thing. There are teams that win. Does the best team always win? We all know that's not true.
Sure.
So by just beating a team, even if you beat them, so therefore, if a team beats a team, does that make them better? No. So that means if they beat them twice, that means they're better, right? Logically, that wouldn't follow logic either. And I think if you look at the 2 games USC's played against Utah, there are some. It would raise some serious eyebrows if you said that those games were too even. You know, the games were played and it was.
So
I know
when
Larry,
Ohio
let
State
Larry come
beats
here. He's going to
Rutgers
land
by
based
50
me.
points 10 years in a row. At what point do we know that Ohio State's a better team than Rutgers?
Well, because you can see that's USC lost by 1, and they lost their Heisman quarterback on the second drive of the game. And then you have a team that's destroying another team on a consistent basis. What do those two things have in common? Pretty much nothing, right? I mean, I see arguments. And by the way, DeReal, back me up this. Have I ever even remotely said that the SEC is not the best conference?
No, you have not said that once.
Have I ever come close to saying that they're not the best conference?
No, you haven't said that.
Let's get that out of the way. Let's stop bringing that up. I don't think that the Pac-12 is better or on par with them. I'm not. However, there are teams in the Pac-12 that are on par and better than some of the teams in the SEC. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm not saying we're a better conference.
All I'm saying, though, is South Carolina and Utah are somewhat comparable. But, Mark, if you could pull up this comment by Not Use Dexter, it's a brilliant comment. He says, you don't think they're comparable? How do you know? Did they determine that on the field? Are you just guessing like everybody else in every other situation that you complain about? That's his comment.
Who are not comparable?
South Carolina and Utah.
Oh, fair point. No, that's legit. But then again, by doing that, both you guys, you are validating my point. So we can do that. I'll admit, yeah, I was wrong. Oops, I messed up. Thank you both for validating my point. Well, yeah, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have said that. You guys are both right.
I think
we don't know, do we? So thank you both for making my point. I misspoke. That was my bad.
Well, apparently at some point we do know which teams are better than which teams, because you just stated that Ohio State's better than Rutgers. So we can make evaluations on all these teams to a certain extent.
Yeah, if the difference in the two teams are light years apart, for sure. But I mean, I would even say, I mean, the difference between South Carolina and Utah isn't remotely the difference between those two teams. But I think it's significant enough that I feel, just like we're saying, who here doesn't think that Georgia is, if not the best, one of the top 2 teams in the country? Raise your hand if you don't think that. Do we know that? How do we know that? Oh, you don't? Who's?
Well, I thought you said raise your hand if you do. I thought you were going to say if you do, and then you said don't. So I got
okay.
Yeah.
So we can make those assumptions, right? But even then, what if? Sorry, Georgia fans. What if Michigan takes it to them? Because they're kind of similar. I think that Georgia's the same team with. You know, I've heard a bunch of people say this, and I've been saying too. It's pretty much the same team with. Matter of fact, the first person I heard say was probably Uncle Lou. They're the same team, but just with better players.
Okay, but here's my thinking. If Michigan beats Georgia, I would just think Michigan is significantly the best team this year compared to everybody else. I would still think Georgia's the second best team.
And I think the reason why they play it, I'm with you. I think that Georgia is probably the best team. And I think that Ohio State and Michigan could beat Georgia on a given night. And that's why we let them play. Now, wouldn't it be great if we had like an ACC team that was quality to get in there, or maybe a 10-2 Washington or 11-2 Washington had just beat USC by like 3 or 4 touchdowns with Caleb Williams healthy? And now we have the Pac-12 team going in there. So you have the Pac-12, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC this year. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sure if there was someone there that really would deserve being there.
But in your system, regardless of whether anyone deserved it, the ACC would bring somebody as well, correct?
I'm sorry, what, Mark?
Regardless of whether you think they're deserving or they're good enough, under your system, the ACC still gets a slot.
Yeah, they would be the 5 team. They'd probably be the 5 team playing in 11-2 Washington. Sure. Think about that.
And why are they playing 11-2 Washington? Under the Pac-12 system, Utah won the Pac-12 championship. So even though you don't think they're the best team, they won the championship and would be playing with 3 losses in the playoff.
So the playoff. First off, I didn't personally set up the Pac-12 tiebreaker. Right, it was like the 4th tiebreaker. It was a really bizarre finish. We all agree to the Pac-12 season. And I'll say this: the Pac-12 has 5 teams in the top 25 and a 6th team at 18 in UCLA in the top 20. That's why I've been saying that they're the second best conference in the country.
Because a bunch of people ranked them there.
Well, isn't that what we're all doing? And those bunch
Well,
of people, Mark, they aren't Tim Prangley, school teacher. These guys, these guys do
no,
have
no, no.
resumes of their own.
Don't defend the AP voters because most of them
not
are
the AP
idiots
vote. No,
that
no,
don't
not
know
the
what
AP
they're talking
voters.
about.
No, not the AP voters. I'm talking about the
You're talking about
committee.
the committee.
Yeah. And so these guys have a much better, I'm not going to, I like to think I know about football, but these guys have a much better resume when it comes to knowing football than I do.
I'm not so sure about that, Tim.
Most of them. Look, most of the people that chat probably have a better resume. All right. I'm just louder. But my point is that's regardless we talk about it, those teams, the Pac-12 that's so easily dismissed, however you chop it up, those 6 teams are pretty good. Those 5 teams are good. And there's probably 2 or 3 very, very good teams in that group.
Tim, did you hear what I said at the very beginning of the call, or near the beginning of my call before you jumped on? I said the Pac-12 has about 5 or 6 really good teams, but for whatever reason, people look at the top of the conference and not the bottom of the conference, when in my opinion, each team should be evaluated equally. So USC and Utah should have the same evaluation scale as Arizona State and Colorado.
I'd probably say Stanford and Colorado at the very bottom, but yeah.
So
but again, look at any conference, right? They're going to have their toilet at they're going to have the teams that are your bottom dwellers in every conference. You go, yeah, but those bottom dwellers could beat this and that, blah, blah, blah. It's not as simple as saying, well, we'll put the first best team against the other best team. No, what it would be if you really wanted to work this thing out, and I certainly don't want to do the math on it, is if you want to do this really guessing game on who's better, you either take the top team, take Georgia, and then you say, okay, Georgia would beat every team in the Big 12, the Pac-12. Okay. Then you take the second best. Let's say you go, I don't know, who are we going to call second best? Are we going to say Alabama? So Alabama plays the entire Pac-12, right? And you can say, do they beat this team, this team, this team, this team? And you do that through every team all the way down. And then you go to every conference to do that. I heard the other day, I think it was you or someone, okay, let's take the best team against the best team. Okay, they win. The best team against the best team. Okay, they win. That doesn't really tell you about the whole conference.
No, I would. If you want to
And even
determine the
what you're doing
conference, you
doesn't
have to
tell
do
us,
like seed and
because
matchup.
we'd all have a different opinion on who would win those games.
Yeah.
The way I do it during the off season, I didn't do it last year just because I was lazy, but at the end of the season, I take all the non-conference results among the Power 5. And I don't just say, well, the Pac-12 went 8-13, therefore they're here, and the Big 10 went 12-9, therefore they're here. I do what you just did to a certain extent to say the 1 seed in the Pac-12 beat the 1 seed in the Big 10. So that is worth 1 full point. But if the 1 seed in the Pac-12 beat the 10th seed in the Big 10, each one of those positions is worth, and I do the math, the fraction of that point, and then I add up all the seedings and all the games and the wins and losses to determine this is what the results told us about this season.
Those were like some of my favorite videos that you made, Mark.
Thank you.
And so I wouldn't like, even on that kind of a metric, how the Pac-12 would stack up against SEC, because I agree with you, Daryl. Some of the teams, I'm thinking like maybe 13 through 16, probably stinkers, but I think your 12 through 8 would definitely crush the bottom 12 in the Pac-12, Pac-4, the bottom 4 in the Pac-12. So, I get you, but I'm once again, and go back to this. I didn't say the Pac-12 is better than the SEC. I'm saying the Pac-12 is better than the Big 10 and the ACC and the Big 12.
Yeah, I don't think the Pac-12 is better than the Big 12.
Great. You don't think it? And I do. There we go. We're football fans.
Yeah, I think the Big 12, the difference is their depth is more solid than the Pac-12. So I think the Pac-12 have some of the best teams compared to both conferences.
There's really, no offense, there's really not a lot of data to back up anything you just said.
True.
Well, that's what bowl season's partially for.
Even that's, yeah, I get you. It's what we're doing again is that beauty contest. You know what I mean, Daryl? And that's why I come back to what I want to do. We don't have to have these debates. The Pac-12 puts
ruin my channel.
They're gonna put no, because there's always gonna be the 4-5 debate, Mark. That 4-5 debate. Really, does anyone have a better playoff than that? I know, Will, you hate it, but assuming that you guys join the Big 10.
Yeah, well, you're excluding one of the most valuable brands, I would say, in all of college football at Notre Dame. But on one hand, they would force Notre Dame to finally join a conference. So I might be in favor of it just from that standpoint alone.
I think we're probably closer to going to a Power 4 at some point, really close down the road, than we are to any of the stuff we're talking about. So,
Yeah, I think.
solve everything.
No offense, but I don't think the Pac-12 adding, what is it, San Diego State and Air Force or something like that.
Nor do I
SMU.
think adding Central Florida and BYU and whatever that the Big 12 is adding.
Yeah, I
right?
think it's just basically the Power 2 and everybody else.
This is almost like a right brain versus left brain situation where, one of my very best friends doesn't care about college football. He likes to watch it, but he doesn't get into all this with knowing players and rankings. He could care less. He sits down on Saturday afternoon to watch his guys play football. And he's like, why don't all the conference champions play in a tournament for the national championship? Why do we have all these rankings and like this conference is better than that conference? Why don't they all play? And they should all play each other within the conference, because then you don't have results that aren't valid. And he falls right in line with Tim. This should be the national championship. Every conference champion should be playing. If you can't win your conference, too bad. You're gone. And there's the national championship. And I tell him that makes total sense. But it also makes sense that there is an evaluation by people to say, not every conference is created equal. Some are much better or somewhat better than others. And we know that to be true. To what degree? We can throw out all sorts of metrics and results to try to figure that out. And we would just simply like to see the best teams. And this is real. We want to see the best teams. I don't care where they come from. I want to see the best teams in the tournament.
Yeah. But to me, that's just one step away from us having a bunch of AP, UPI, and a computer decide who the two best teams are and throw them in there. Because I mean, it's a beauty contest. It's not a playoff. Again, change it. Change the name. Whatever name you want. Just don't call it a playoff.
Well,
Tim, if the only thing that stops you is from the name, then I don't care. Change the name. You can call it literally anything you want to satisfy you.
Well, the SEC beauty pageant. That's what you want.
Well, Tim, you do understand when you say beauty pageant, those invitations give, for as much as I hate the current system and the invitations, they do have to be based on results. You can't just say Alabama went 8-5 this year, but we think that they're great, so they're going to the playoff. The resume does have to be right there to be selected.
Where I had the problem and it falls apart for me, Mark, is when in the beginning of the year, we had this most worthless, the most detrimental thing in college football is the preseason polls. And then all these wins and the narrative begin to be shaped by the preseason polls.
Absolutely.
We start with the fact that the SEC is the best conference. I agree, Daryl, so don't chat, just chill out, right? But so we're going to stack, 6 or 7 SEC teams in the top 20, okay? And then every time an SEC team beats an SEC team that's ranked and they got an SEC, then they got a quality win and the narrative is just rolling and just rolling. And then you go to the Big 12 and you say, well, or the ACC. And the ACC's got a couple good teams, but they suck. So let's win over this team, blah, blah. I mean, oh my gosh, they beat, they beat this team. So they're really good.
You're right.
And so it's a narrative that feeds on itself and feeds on itself. And we don't know. And that's how we get these games where everyone thinks that they're like, oh my God, what a huge upset. But in reality, it really wasn't an upset. It's just what our perception didn't meet reality.
Tim, what you're saying makes total sense. And it is the truth. It happens every year. However, it can only happen to a certain degree. Because if the SEC, if we go into a season and everybody says the SEC is the greatest, it's the best, but Alabama goes out and loses to Texas, and Georgia goes out and loses to Oregon, and Ole Miss goes out and loses to Georgia Tech, and those are all losses instead of wins, well, then we're going to come to the conclusion the SEC is not it this year. So those perceptions are backed up, or the logical of us do make changes in our evaluations.
And in the end, right, Mark, after 12 games and then championship games, it all washes out. We in the end, we do usually come up with like the 4 or 5-ish teams that we know, usually 1 or 2 teams that we know are the best. Some years are different than others. But my point is we still, We literally don't know. I mean, we can argue, we can talk resume. Hey, this is how we've always done it. This is how it is. We see this. Here's the resume. But we've seen it on the field. I'm sorry, I can't come up with a really good example for you right now off the top of my head, but there have been games where it's not a fluke. A team that comes out of nowhere and is decidedly just gets better the whole year and throws this huge upset. And it goes, wow, what an upset. But if you really watch the whole season and you watch how the other team was overrated the whole year, it's really that it happens a lot throughout the college history, the history of college football, and you go, how could that team beat that team? And it wasn't a fluke. It was that team was that good, but they were undervalued in the media. They were probably ranked really low to start the year. They crawled up as they went, and then they had this massive win. So,
Tim, if I had to take a guess of what you're talking about, I assume App State versus Texas A&M would be a perfect example.
No, because App State isn't the kind of team I'm talking about. I'm talking about
Texas A&M is the team you're talking about.
I'm talking about a situation where a team knocks off a huge power that was a presumptive top 2 team, and I just can't come up top of my head, but it has happened in history.
Texas A&M was ranked 6th, so
yeah. What's up, Larry? Sorry,
Larry.
Oh, hey, how are you guys?
Doing well. Thanks.
Doing well. How about you?
Good.
Larry, I'm trashing Utah, Larry.
Oh no, you're fine. You know what? After losing a championship game, I will not kick you while you're down. So, we've had this discussion last time, and it was the parity in the SEC this year exists. We saw South Carolina beat Tennessee, who supposedly was the second best team, yet they got their butts wiped. Florida just wiped the floor with South Carolina. So this year, it's definitely any given Saturday. I mean, in the SEC, we're used to Alabama and Georgia just dominating. That was not the case. So I grew up playing football, baseball, basketball, and this is the only sport that I see you don't have a true champion. I mean, how do we settle who's the best football team in the state?
You mean like in high school?
Yeah. How do we determine that? You win your region.
Yeah. Yep.
So why should college football be different than what you're used to growing up?
Because college football is marketed by television contracts.
Right. So I understand what Daryl's saying, and yes, the SEC has been super dominant, and nobody's going to disagree with that. But this year, the parity and other teams being a little more equal are there, in my opinion.
Actually, the SEC's performance outside the conference this year isn't much different than what it is typically.
Right, but the SEC performance out of the Southeast is what? I remember LSU. I remember LSU going to UCLA and just totally getting their asses handed to them, and then it was that was a 6-6 LSU, and it's like, it's like the SEC's grand until a brand name doesn't do good. And then they're garbage, but yet they still have one of the top 10 talented teams in the country. So, like Uncle Lou said, Utah is going to Florida. Utah has the 7th most talented team in the Pac-12, and they're playing the 7th most talented team in the country. So, just like, okay, this whole conversation started with Florida, Oregon State. And we're talking about opt-outs. Even with their opt-outs, what is the ranking of the rest of that roster that Florida has? OSU, I think, has Oregon State, probably has 4 or 5 4-stars on their entire team. So it's just, I don't know. It's just frustrating to hear the crap. I want to see conference champions. And last year, who's really the national champ? Because I saw Alabama win the SEC.
Well, Larry, my thinking with the UCLA versus LSU is if LSU won the SEC or did well in the SEC last year, then I think you would have a legitimate case about the that discussion. But since LSU didn't do so well in the SEC last year, then
Who
it's
did
not
LSU?
really.
Didn't LSU upset somebody in the SEC last year?
Yeah, but you got to look at the
Whoa,
totality.
whoa! Did they not upset one of the best teams in the SEC? Which
I'll
goes
take,
to prove what Tim is saying. Any given Saturday, sometimes a team is just better. I mean, LSU lost to UCLA, but they beat one of the best teams. South Carolina beat the crap out of Tennessee.
Without Hendon Hooker.
LSU lost to who? UCLA.
LSU lost to UCLA last year, but I also believe they
wow.
upset somebody in the SEC, didn't they? Didn't they beat a better team last year?
When they went,
even though they were
6?
supposedly garbage.
When they went 6-6.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm seeing is they beat Texas A&M, Florida. They beat Florida, and they beat Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it was Florida. I'm not sure about the Texas.
Maybe it was A&M. Was it A&M after they beat Alabama? Larry, is that what you're thinking?
Okay.
Yeah. So
LSU 6-6. They beat 8-4 Texas A&M.
Larry, you're not arguing. Wait, but you're not arguing the SEC. What it's all going to come back to is that they're going to make you feel like you're crazy because you're arguing the SEC's.
I'm not making anybody feel crazy. I just hold people accountable when they make statements. So I just say, okay, what are we talking about here when we make statements? That's all I do here. This is kind of part of my role and my job. When people make statements,
Mark,
say,
whenever I say they, it doesn't mean that you're included. I'm talking about the chat. I'm talking about Durrell.
Right. We're using a ton of transitive property. Transitive property. And we can take last year alone, Oregon State goes to the shoe and beats Ohio State. Utah demolishes Oregon twice, but then lose to Ohio State. So the transitive it doesn't work. I want to see a conference champion in there. And 7-5 Pitt got demolished by Clemson. So I don't think we got to worry about that. And if they beat them, they get to go in. That's all there is to it.
Of course, yeah, transitive property does not work when it's just one single thread. But when you put a ton of transitive properties together, you know what that's called? It's called a resume. It's called the entire season. So there can be an evaluation made between these conferences to a certain extent. Like Tim said earlier, there aren't enough games played between the conferences to come to a definitive result, in my opinion, between the other 4 conferences right now. But the SEC has played better in the non-conference. And I'm discounting recruiting rankings, discounting NFL draft picks, discounting past history. Just looking at 2022, the SEC has played better against the other 4 conferences than the other 4 conferences have. But to distinguish the other 4 is... Right. And even the SEC has not been dominant, crazy dominant. They're 11-5 against the other 4, but the other 4.
And the thing is, though, I think the one I know we have to do the resume thing, but like for instance, that Clemson team that kicked the crap out of college football, it was like Clemson and then just a bad conference. You know, you can still have the best team in the country in a bad conference.
Sure.
And so, you know, when USC was dominant, it was like, you know, Washington State was pretty good. Cal was very good, but the rest of the conference was crap. But that didn't mean that USC wasn't one of the best teams in the country. You know, when Ohio State sometimes the Big Ten's probably down a little bit, but Ohio State's super dominant. That doesn't mean that Ohio State's not one of the best teams in the country. So we can go around about which conference is the best. At the end of the day, it's just we're just chanting the ESPN SEC chant as much as we want. It doesn't mean that, no offense, that Kentucky's a good team. Yes, they're a good team. Well, then we're grouping them in with the teams that we call Utah and other teams.
Have I grouped Kentucky with Utah today?
Dude, Kentucky's not a good team. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go there.
Not a good team?
So when we're talking about football, it doesn't matter if you play in the best conference. It's, are you the best team? And when we do the eyeball test, what we're doing is we're not having a playoff. We're deciding, television is deciding which teams are the best teams. And unless a team like TCU just completely there's no other takers, you know, I mean, there would be a good chance of the identical records. that other teams would have gotten over TCU because they're just, well, they're favorable to the TV, but if there's a team like a Cincinnati or a TCU that says, hey, look, you're going to look really stupid if you try to leave us out, they're going to pick the teams that look the best. And it helps teams like USC more often than not. But it doesn't mean that we have the 4 best teams. And we're allowing people to pick these teams instead of letting teams win the field. So you guys can argue all you want. If you want the 4 best teams that you think are the 4 best teams, go for it. It's a great system we have. If you want to have the 4 or 5 teams that deserve the most to be in a playoff, then you might want to look at what I was trying to say to you guys.
Which I have no issue with, again, except for the people that we put in charge of determining who gets buys. I don't want buys because those people are incapable, just like I would be incapable. I'm not saying that I'm smarter than them. I'm saying we are all incapable, in my estimation, of determining who should receive buys because it's not the NFL and those buys are not earned.
And I mean, in my model, there is technically, right, that 3 teams get buys. But how I look at it is it's not. It's just a bone throw to 3 and 4. I mean, sorry, the bone throw to 4 and 5, because you're gonna at some point it is gonna get subjective.
Well, if you're gonna, Tim, what you are proposing obviously is not happening. So you might as well take the further step and either condense the conferences down to 4 or expand them to 8, and then propose your playoff. Because that's the way it should be then. 4 champions or 8 champions.
Because Mark, because I really do feel you need to play your way in. And if we do 8, then there's a bunch of teams that didn't win their conference that are also now playing.
No. 8 conferences. That's what I'm saying. What
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, what you're proposing is fantasy, so you might as well take it the next step and make it fantasy and change.
Well, all of it's fantasy except this horrible 12 team we have now. I mean, yeah. Anything out there?
Wait a minute. Hold on. Why are you calling the 12 team horrible? Aren't you getting basically what you want out of it?
So you're a big basketball. You're a Kentucky guy. You're a big basketball guy. What's the lowest seed ever to win the tournament? What, like 12 or something like that? Or
I think Villanova in 1985 was an 8 seed.
8 seed. Okay. We're talking about 12 teams now, and when we're talking about that, maybe this year there's probably maybe 5 or 6 teams could play tight and within touchdowns of each other. And in most years, it's a blowout in the top 4. And now all of a sudden we're going to have 12 teams. Talk about opt-outs. You guys, do you think that some of these guys that they're actually in the playoff and they're a 12 team playing a 1 team and you're the number 1 defensive end in the country? Do you think that dude's going to play in that playoff game? He's not going to play in that game. You're going to have opt-outs in the playoff.
Hey, you're throwing some of the concerns I'm throwing, Tim. I'm glad you're not.
Yeah, I've said that ever since it was proposed.
Yeah, so it's a 12 team playoff is completely watered down. It's to make money for television. So yeah, I think it's crap.
Yeah, I don't like it either. There's plenty of reasons. I don't like the seating is my main issue with it. But
I know, because you have no respect for other conferences, dude. It's okay.
If you want conferences in there, that's fine. But I just want to. I want merit to matter.
I think the SEC, guys. I think the SEC is the best, but I'm telling you, they're not always going to be the best conference. I just hate to break the news to you. It's not like the SEC is going to dominate college football from now on.
If the Big Ten got 4 teams in there with Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, and Penn State, and the SEC would only get 3. But I was pretty confident that the Big Ten, all 4 of those teams deserve to be in there. I would have no issues. It's not about the SEC. I just want to see the best teams play.
We don't. That's what I keep trying to tell you, man.
I'm guessing based on the resume. I know, but that's all I can do.
Teams. We don't know the top 4 teams.
Well, let me make a hard transition.
We don't know them.
Let me make a hard transition because Will hasn't spoken
in circles
and felt like 40 minutes. Will, you wanted to talk about UTSA versus Troy.
Yes, he did.
Yes, I do.
But I unfortunately am going to preempt this for just like 20 seconds because I'm going to say something to Tim that I don't believe should be considered. However, I'm going to see if you understand the logic in this. And then Will is going to give us our great dissertation on the, whatever it's called, Cure Bowl. Okay. Let's say we can all agree that the SEC has been the best conference for the last 15 years, to whatever degree, by this much or by a lot, whatever. Okay. And that has been proven by the results in non-conference games, because it has been, and it's been proven by playoff appearances, national championship, playoff record is ridiculous, whatever it is, 14-5. Okay. It's also been, and these aren't results on the field, but they're strong indicators, recruiting rankings, NFL draft selections. They recruit the best, then they play the best on the field, and then they produce the most NFL players. It's a pretty easy process to see what we've seen over the last 15 years.
And the best coaches, yeah, in general.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Okay, let's say we can all agree on that prior to 2022, okay? Let's say the results in non-conference play in 2022 are inconclusive. We don't have enough data, not enough games, not enough conclusive results to say who the best conference is. It could be anybody. Now, I don't want the 2022 playoff seedings or playoff teams to be determined on what we thought because of what's been going on the last 15 years. But just as a matter of discussion about best conference, don't you think that it's logical to think this has been going on for 15 years and we can all agree on it, and the results this season actually do back it up, but let's say they're inconclusive, that we would still believe the SEC to be the best conference?
Okay.
And again, let me underline, I don't believe that should have anything to do with selecting playoff teams whatsoever. Any of that. Okay.
I'm with you.
Will.
So I'm pretty excited for this game coming up between UTSA and Troy. So for my channel, The Young Guns, I interviewed a guy that writes for the student newspaper for UTSA and a guy that writes for Troy. So I kind of got like a good preview of both teams for the game coming up.
So everyone should head over to the Young Guns channel, which are you guys able to drop that into the chat? Because I tried to last night or the night before, whenever I was on last, and I was.
And you got the movie, didn't you, Mark?
Pardon me?
You started getting the movie, didn't you? I tried looking at the Young Guns channel. I started to get that.
Oh, yeah.
I started to get the 80s movie.
Exactly.
I was trying to drop it as well.
So I really like UTSA's quarterback. I gotta remember. Frank Harris. He's really been like, I mean, he's not like an elite quarterback, but he's a great quarterback, and he's led UTSA to another conference championship as they defeated the Mean Green in North Texas. And then Troy has just such a great stout defense. So I really think this is going to be a fun offense versus defense game. And with John Summerall, just what he's done at Troy. The one thing about Troy is their quarterback play isn't great, but UTSA's defense isn't great. So this is kind of strength against strength, weakness against weakness. And I think this should be a good one.
Yeah.
Will, was I right earlier on the show when I said these are both teams won their conferences?
Yeah, both teams did win their conferences. This is the only bowl game between two teams that won their conference. So, yeah, I'm pretty hyped for this one. But if I had to give the edge, I would say that Troy would outscore. I mean, UTSA will outscore Troy. But, yeah. I think. And Carlton Marshall for Troy he's really the guy to look out for because he broke the record of FBS tackles. He broke that. Tim McGarrigle of Northwestern. So he's going to be a menace for Frank Wilson all night in Orlando.
No opt-outs.
We're finally back to like 10 years ago. No opt-outs. Great. Just football.
See, that's why I'm glad about these G5 bowl games is I think there's a recognition on most of the players' part that they're not going to be good enough to get drafted in the NFL. So they just play in every single game. Most of them. A higher percentage than in the Power 5. So most of them play. Like if you took the percentage of G5 teams that had players opt out versus P5 teams and their players that opted out, I would imagine that the G5 team has less of a percentage than the P5 teams.
Well, I mean, I think that has to do with the fact that guys that are like that are day 2 guys, or guys that are going 5 through round 7 or 5, they're not the guys that are opting out. They're the guys that want to play themselves into earlier rounds so they play the games. It's your guys who think that they have like a draft evaluation that's putting them a day 1 guy, first round guy, and they have the tape on them, right? The scouts have seen them, and they're just the tight end from Michigan, Butt, or last year the Ole Miss quarterback,
Matt Corral.
I mean, these are tragedies and they're rare, but you know what? If you're the dad of these players, really, you're telling me you want your kid to go out there and play in the Cheez-It Bowl and possibly blow his knee out when he could feed his family for generations? I mean, I get it. I don't like it. You know what I mean? I like Mark's idea, the fact that maybe you pay back your at the very least, you broke your contract, you pay back your scholarship. If you don't want to play it, you want to gamble that, go for it, then pay it back. But I think it's a bit much for all of us to say that we wouldn't do it, or that they're quitters and they're cowards. I think you got to realize that these guys are making business decisions. And I will tell you this, because I've seen it, and for Twitter, for good or for bad, you see their teammates ongoing, get your bag, because these guys realize that the reason why they won all these games was because of that dude, and so they want what's best for their friends. We're looking at it as fans. These teammates are looking at it as, you're my teammate, you're my friend. I want you to get what's yours, man. You go do it, because you see it all the time on social media. Go get that bag. Go get it. You deserved it. Blah blah. And that's what they're saying to each other. Who are we to say that they're a quitter on their team? Their teammates. I'm sure there are exceptions, but really, it's what it seems like the attitude is with these kids.
Hey, Mark, I had a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I'm not totally offended, and I get it, but you had the Alamo Bowl above the Rose Bowl. I'm not going to try to take offense, but Texas has so many opt-outs.
Yeah.
That I'm interested in that game, but obviously I'd rather see my Utes. So I'm just curious on your thoughts of that game, why you've got it ranked so high, why you've got it actually the next game behind the playoffs.
Well, to be honest, I can't say that I put a whole lot of thought into that list. If I did, then I wouldn't be doing 25 channels. But I just considered Steve Sarkisian having coached at Washington, and both quarterbacks are playing and healthy and ready to roll. And I just thought, on the surface, that's a really good matchup.
All right. Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah. I'm not going to give you any kind of great details beyond that. I didn't even really consider Texas's opt-outs, to be honest with you.
Right.
Didn't even look into it, which I should, but for a video that's going to get 500 views, I just can't spend like 5 hours on it. So bam, it gets rolled off.
That's fine. That's a great
point. That's a great point. And I will always admit to anything that's not my best work. And there you go. That was just a fun thing. Here's your 10 best bowl games. There you go. I wouldn't even consider the 2 playoff games necessarily to be the 2 best bowls. I just thought, well, with the stakes at hand being what they are, then we know that there are no opt-outs, number one. Number two, we know that everybody's going to be completely bought in.
Number 2, but now that's going to get bumped down the list because we're on 12 teams. But
so we know Darrell wants the Tulsa game. That's one of the highlight games you have, Darrell.
Also made a bowl.
Is the Tulane UTSA? Or who is it?
Troy UTSA.
Troy UTSA.
Yeah, I'm going to look forward to that. That's going to be the game I probably look forward to the most this weekend. That or Cincinnati Louisville.
Yeah, those are the 2 games I'm really excited to see. I think Fresno Wazoo could be a good game too, but I'm just worried that Fresno might pull ahead and not look back.
I mean, it was going to be Oregon State versus Florida, but with the amount of opt-outs Florida has, I don't think it's going to be competitive for long. So
remember, like we were talking about in the chat, Darryl, I think it's going to be an interesting game based on Florida is going to be running a completely different offense. I mean, it was a read option. It was all built around Anthony Richardson. It's going to be kind of strange to watch Florida actually have to play a game with a drop back quarterback. That's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea where to rank Florida, but I mean, I assume they put their best players in the best position to win. So having that many opt-outs is, I would think, has got to impact them severely. So
I'm hearing the trenches are going to remain, though.
that would be okay. That could be interesting. But Oregon State, they're really good at running the ball this year. So
yeah,
even if it was at full strength, I might favor that category still to Oregon State. Because
right.
Oregon State is a legit top 20 team to me. Like, they're really good.
Yep.
So I've been on Oregon State all year. I'm not going to disrespect the Beavers. I know there's a selection of Beaver Nation that we have in the chat that supports the show. It feels like on a daily basis. So good for them.
I think one of my
great defense.
One of my games I really want to watch, and I mean, it sucks that North Carolina had the opt-outs, but I mean, I'm kind of interested in the Oregon-North Carolina bowl game too. That's going to come up. So
I think that could be very entertaining. And if you look at both quarterbacks, like my initial response was, oh yeah, that's an attractive game, Oregon, North Carolina. But my initial response after about 5 seconds was Oregon's a lot better team than North Carolina. I don't know that this is going to be that competitive.
Right.
Well, I'm looking forward to see what my Cats or Kentucky does against Iowa, just because I want to see if either team can score more than 3 points. I'll be blown away if more than a field goal scored by either team.
Daryl, I'm going to be watching the other game that's going on at the same time, man. I'm sorry.
You're telling me you're going to put Alabama versus Kansas State above Kentucky, Iowa, Will?
Yeah, that's a close one.
I'm sorry.
Daryl, that's a close one. I'm not sure.
This is what pisses me off about bowl season is that we get to see the Troys and Texas San Antonios of the world all play in exclusive TV windows. And then we get close to New Year's Day and the best teams are playing in the bigger conferences. And I want to watch all those games exclusively and they're all on top of each other. That pisses me off.
I think the Pac-12, both Pac-12 games this weekend. Not that anyone else cares except for me and Larry.
Oh, that does.
They're both
Yes.
overlapping each other. It's just
True.
absolutely stupid.
Yeah.
But at least they don't start at the same time.
No, but like an hour and a half apart. What's the point?
Well, you're not telling me you're excited to see Iowa's third-string quarterback versus Kentucky's second or third-string quarterback?
Heck yeah.
I'd rather watch the Kentucky-Louisville basketball game.
Hey, Louisville's on a one-game winning streak in
Yeah,
basketball.
they're back in it. They're back.
We
I was
supporting
supporting Austin last night. He was excited about his Cardinals.
Hey, we should see if Daryl's up for a side bet. Who goes?
No bet.
Okay.
He's done with bets for the
bragging
year.
right bet. Bragging right bet. Who goes in the draft first, Richardson or Levis?
I would assume Levis goes in the draft first. Have you seen the projections?
He's got the measurables. I think Levis goes before him. He's a big quarterback with a big arm, Larry. He's got a lot of. Remember, some of these quarterbacks come out of nowhere. You know what I mean? They're on a team, and then they get into the NFL, and they have that arm. He's just a big dude with a big arm. I think he goes ahead of him.
Have you seen what the scouts have been saying, though? Some of the scouts have been saying that Will Levis is strong and durable, but he's taken so many hits that it's amazing he's still playing. I mean, that's
linebacker who throws the ball. Got it.
Yeah, well, that's good that he's able to take so many hits, but that's a big criticism, in my opinion, on the offensive line. Like, if the top thing a lot of people says is, hey, this guy can take a lot of hits and get back up, not a good look for the offensive line.
Right.
LBC, is that true? Did Purdue really hire Graham Harrell? That's got to be a joke. I think
Purdue hired Drew Brees today as an interim coach.
Yep.
Interim assistant, I believe.
Well, they're going to need
man.
him. They're missing 4 of their best players.
Graham Harrell to leave WVU to Purdue. It's
Oh.
official.
Hey guys,
So is
it
the
is
Big Ten
true.
trying to go with the
I warned
prime
Joey.
effect?
Hey, it is true. He is the offensive coordinator for Purdue now.
Oh no, Michael. No.
Why
not
is
good.
he not? Why is he not a decent coordinator or something? Or
I don't know. I mean, he's from the Mike Leach tree, and he's great. He was a great quarterback we all know about. I think it wasn't so. I come from a USC perspective, and it had the Helton effect. Obviously, it must not have been good coaching under him. But it just didn't. And SC had a terrible offensive line. All that given, I just wasn't really impressed with what he was able to.
all right, let me ask you guys this: what's your take about Purdue hiring Ryan Walters as the new head coach? I know you
I
guys.
kind of wanted a flashier hire that would make Purdue stand out and be able to compete with. I don't know. I just don't know if they can compete with Luke Fickell and Matt Rule with that hire. I wanted a better hire for Purdue.
Yeah, but
Like an outside the box one, not just a typical Big Ten West coach.
But see, here's the thing though: who was out there still? Nobody really.
Yeah, but couldn't Purdue have done what Louisville did and get a coach that already has a job? I mean, nobody thought Jeff Brom was on the market until Louisville got him.
That's right. You just take coaches now.
Well, yeah, because because Satterfield left. Satterfield doesn't leave. Prom still at Purdue. But anyway, I digress. But no, I want to say my condolences to Mike Leach's family. Mark, that was a very nice tribute you did for him the other day.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. But speaking of Purdue, you guys, they're going to be missing 4 of the guys. But how much of an effect do you think that's going to be with Breeze there as an interim assistant, with Austin Burton is going to be the quarterback?
What's Breeze's position?
He's like an
Interim coach.
Interim coach. He's just there for the bowl game.
If they want to spice up these bowl games, you know what they need to do in a situation like that is give Drew Brees a game of eligibility and let him quarterback for Purdue. Let's watch that. We'd all be watching that.
Let him know. Let's let him quarterback for Iowa. Then we'd have something. There we go.
Oh yeah. But hey, Tim, I get one question I want to ask you. What's the deal with UCLA? I see they approved it, but there's some kind of stipulations with it or something.
Oh wow, that's Tony's realm. But from what I've picked from it, so it looks like there's and Rick, I saw you. Correct me if I'm wrong. They got the green light to go, but they're going to be required, depending on the TV contracts, to pay subsidize Cal, $2 to $10 million a year. When I heard that number, that's a pretty wide number. So I guess they're probably looking at what the new TV contracts would be for the Big 12, Big 10, the Pac-12, and how much the loss is going to be to Cal, which is I think is absurd. Whatever the UC system is doing, that's just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, no, not bad. This was runner. I cannot think of the running back to USC. Tim. What was his name? Broke his leg in the game a couple weeks ago. Yeah, is he back next year, or was this his last year?
No, he was a grad transfer from Oregon. This was his last year.
Or was it? All right, just wondering stuff like that. No. All right. So major bowls and stuff like that. Which bowl are you looking to the most, Mark?
A non-major bowl games. Well, I better stick with my rankings. Larry's going to hold me to my rankings, and he should. If he watches a video that says 10 best bowl games, then absolutely. Then he should count on the 10 best bowl games. And I'm going to say, I really like this Texas-Washington game, but I certainly want to see the Rose Bowl. And the Rose Bowl is the Rose Bowl, of course, beside what's going out on the field, Penn State and Utah. So those 2 bowl games.
Will, are you going to be wearing Purdue colors when they play LSU?
No, I will be.
He will not be.
Yeah, I will be a diehard Boiler Up.
Oh, God,
Boiler Up for you, buddy.
Now, Will, how deep of an investment are you going to make since this is a bowl game? Are you going to buy like a train set, or are you going to have?
Encourage you, please.
Well, I don't know. Like without Aiden O'Connell, I'm not gonna be. My expectations are gonna be a little low because it's gonna be tough. But if they win, I'll be really happy. So not a huge investment, but I'll be happy if it comes through.
But
Yeah.
the thing is Jaden Daniels going to play, or is he iffy with the ankle injury still?
I don't think it's going to matter.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Mike,
Nah,
you're missing your 4 of your best players.
I know. Sure. Anyway, I got one thing I was going to say. Going into next season is Penix and Williams going to be the top 2 quarterbacks in the Pac-12. Tim,
One more time. Sorry. What was that, Mike?
Michael Penix and Caleb Williams, are they going to be the top 2 quarterbacks in the
Well, I
Pac-12
don't
next
know.
year?
If Nix comes back, I mean, he's right in the mix with those guys for sure. Without a doubt. And there's been talk, Larry, can you tell me if this is correct, that Rising might come back next year?
Yes.
Is that still true?
Nice.
Yep.
So,
that
I
would
mean,
be interesting.
I think any one of those guys could be the Pac-12 quarterback of the year next year.
Mm-hmm. And congrats to Williams winning the Heisman this year, too. So,
It was amazing what he did this year. Absolutely.
yeah.
What do
And
we,
just-
Keithy might be coming back too, Tim.
Wow, that's interesting. You would think he would have enough tape, and
Yeah.
you know that the scouts are drooling for him.
Well, he
That's
was number 1. Kincaid was our number 2.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Why don't we go around the horn and everybody get their final say in, and we're going to shut it down for the night. Tim, we'll start with you.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's always a pleasure.
Of course.
I don't have anything really to add. It was a good talk to you guys.
The real.
Well, I'm looking forward to the Kentucky-Iowa bowl game in a few weeks. I've seen reports that Kentucky is reportedly going to get Liam Cohen as the offensive coordinator. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to an exciting 3-2, 5-2 type game against Iowa again. Get to play the same team back-to-back years. Yay. So exciting.
Will, what you got?
Just excited for this bowl game. Excited to see if Troy will be able to play ball control and keep UTSA's offense at bay and run the ball. So yeah, it should be a good contrasting of styles, and yeah, it should be a good game tomorrow night.
And we've got the Young Guns streaming tonight.
We're planning on it, although they're doing a recording with the Oregon guy right now. I'm just making sure everything goes well.
Your
So once that
program
ends-
schedule's getting kind of convoluted.
Yeah.
You guys are becoming
Yeah.
too big of an operation now.
Yeah, so
Apparently.
once that ends, I'm sure we'll start up soon.
Larry, I appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much for that. That is much appreciated. And I
You're
hope
welcome.
you did not take offense to me jumping on you earlier about LSU and UCLA. I was just clarifying, and maybe I was a little harsh because I interrupted everybody at the same time. But thank you for that, Larry.
Oh, no problem, Mark. Me and Tim and you kind of communicate on the same lines sometimes. We're passionate. So I have no problem with passion. Looking forward to the Florida Oregon State. I guess it's the closest I'm going to get to redemption until the 1st of next year, when we just completely take them up and down Rice Eccles and the Wasatch Mountains. So good luck to everybody in their bowl games, and that's what I'm looking forward to, is the Florida Oregon State.
All right, Michael, before we see Purdue
All right.
become the sacrificial lamb to LSU, apparently, what do you got for us?
Not much. First of all, Mark, guys, thanks for letting me be a guest on the show so many times this year. Really appreciate it. But do me one thing this year, being in the spirit of Christmas, and Jeff would, to quote Jeff again, go to Amazon.com and help Mark. It helps him so much and stuff like that. But if you guys can this year, don't go out and spend an arm and leg for it. But if you can find someone who's being down in the dumps and stuff and not having a good time, go try to make your Christmas a little bit brighter for them, man. You don't know how much of a difference that makes for people.
Absolutely. Good word, Michael. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for that. And yes, the Amazon link, kicks a couple bucks my way every time you go on Amazon. If you spend, let's say, $100, it may be like 2 or 3 come my way, or 4 or 5, depending on the product. And that doesn't come out of your your balance there. So just consider, do you give Amazon an extra $3 to add to their 1.7 trillion, or does it come to the voice of college football?
Yeah, it should all go to you, Mark. But hey, one thing I want to say as a parting shot, I loved Marvin Harrison when he was in Indianapolis, but his son, Marvin Harrison Sr., can't hold a candle to him. He is going to be 20 times better than his dad.
20 times better.
That's a big take right there.
Wow.
That's a hot take.
Wow.
That's a
That is a
steamer.
hot
I
take.
I am impressed. Yeah, I'm not an Ohio State fan, but I am really impressed with him, man. Especially some of the catches he had this year, like just draw droppers, man. And to be the first unanimous All-American from Ohio State wide receiver, that's surprising. I thought maybe like Chris Carter or maybe Olave or a couple others they've had in the past might have been a unanimous, but to him, that was very surprising and well deserved, by the way.
I'm just trying to calculate what his NFL stats are going to look like if he's 20 times better than his dad. What's he going to catch, like 20,000 passes in the NFL or something like that?
Who knows?
Wow.
But no, his dad was fun to watch. But no, I will say that I cannot wait to see him play at Purdue next year, even though I'm still going to root for Purdue to win.
All right, folks. Thank
All
you
right,
all
guys, have
for
a good
being
one,
here.
man. Merry Christmas to you and your families.
We've got these couple bowl games coming up on Friday, so we will jump on sometime late and do the same thing on Saturday when we've got 6 bowl games, meaningless or otherwise. I don't think so, and Will's going to be watching. He can give us a full analysis of the Cure Bowl, the Duluth Trading Cure Bowl. There we go. Thanks, Tim, Daryl, Will. We appreciate it.
Bye,
See
guys.
everybody on Friday.